Welcome to the Bootstrap Digital Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Tate. I am the founder and president of Crackerjack Scribe, a digital marketing agency that helps tech companies and startups expand their brands online. In this episode, we sit down with Nikki Lindgren, managing partner of Pennock Marketing Agency, to uncover the secrets of creating effective ad campaigns for beauty, lifestyle, and home goods across various digital platforms. From discussing Nikki's journey in the marketing industry to exploring the nuances of multi-platform campaigns, we delve deep into digital marketing strategies. Join us as we uncover the role of artificial intelligence in marketing, the impact of programmatic advertising, and how smaller brands can compete effectively against industry giants. Stay tuned for valuable insights and actionable tips from our expert guest, Nikki Lindgren. Nikki, welcome to Bootstrap Digital Marketing.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura.
Absolutely. Well, why don't we talk about your background? So you have an extensive background in marketing. You worked within various industries, from home goods brands such as Cost Plus World Market to Pango Group, security solutions company to Zepp Health. Can you share a little bit about your journey in the marketing industry and how you started your agency?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started here in the San Francisco Bay Area with a keen interest in being in fashion. But at the time in the early 2000s, my options were Gap or Levi's. And I decided to go in another direction and go into Pottery Barn, where I started in inventory management, not even in marketing. But I quickly learned that having studied marketing, digital was the name of the game. And so I moved over to World Market and launched their e-commerce store with a team of about 7 people. And it was just highly successful out of the gate. And I learned that agency side was really where I could elevate my skill set and help as many businesses as possible at once. So I beelined for an agency role where I helped probably 45 brands in the e-commerce space for entertainment. And after that, I went in-house for a while, e-commerce again. And ultimately, as I was pregnant with my 3rd kid and being laid off from my wearable e-commerce job, I realized, what I'd always wanted to do was be an entrepreneur. And I wanted to go back agency side to help as many businesses as possible, which is how and when we started Pennock in 2020.
So why did you decide to focus on the beauty, lifestyle, and home goods sectors?
Yeah, so my interests, what my passion areas were in, home decor would be where I would find most of our new clients. We made a lot of friendlies in the agency space in the beauty lanes. We just found this niche that snowballed after we had more and more experience.
Speaking of niche, is it when you're launching a company from that perspective, or niche targeting and advertising?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I think niche targeting and advertising makes a lot more sense for us and kind of like the way we approach our clients' business. So we are onboarding another color cosmetics brand. And while we do work with color cosmetics brands, I think what's more interesting for us as we build out our media mix is looking at their personas and their top 3 characteristics of these persona sets and seeing who else we've served who also targeted that persona. So for us, it's more of the niche of the audience. We're not using this for targeting perspectives, as you can probably imagine these days with machine learning coming to the forefront. But I think it helps us provide better context as to what creatives can look like and how the whole digital landscape should come together to drive maximum return on ad spend or lowest CAC.
Before we continue with our interview with Nikki, for those listeners who do not know what CAC is, CAC, I wanted to give a little explanation. CAC, or CAC, is customer acquisition cost. It measures how much an organization spends to acquire new customers. And it's a very important business metric. It is the total cost of sales and marketing efforts, as well as any property or equipment needed to convince a customer to buy a product or a service. Analyzing CAC in conjunction with lifetime value, which is an estimate of how much revenue an account will bring in over its lifetime by continuing to buy or subscribe for a longer period of time, is a common way to discover whether or not a company is operating efficiently. And this is how you calculate CAC. You calculate it by dividing the total expenses to acquire customers, cost of sales and marketing, by the total number of customers acquired over a given time. And now we'll continue with our interview with Nikki Lindgren of Pennock Marketing Agency. All right, well, let's dive into our main topic. So what are the first steps you take when developing a multi-platform campaign?
So the first things we're going to look at is obviously take into account the full size of the budget first to determine how many different campaigns and different channels we could be live on with paid media. And then we're going to look at how much should be spent on what historically was called top of funnel or middle of funnel versus remarketing, so that we aren't skewed too heavily towards bottom of funnel marketing. Because what we found through our time doing this is whenever we spend too heavily against remarketing, our clients' businesses are actually not growing, and it's a kind of a shrinking pool of opportunity. The diminishing return on ad spend just wasn't favorable. Even brands were like hyper focused on return on ad spend, like it dried up and was not as favorable in the third month. So the next thing we're going to look at is how much can we spend on this awareness level or net new customer level of campaign building versus remarketing. And we say like at least 50% should be awareness. In an ideal world, like 70% of any budget should be towards net new audiences so that we aren't of bottom feeders, getting people who are already familiar with the brand.
When it comes to platforms, how do you determine which platforms, like from Amazon ads, TikTok, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, best suits a brand or product?
So our clients usually come to us with like an idea of what they think will be best. So we'll take that into account, but we're definitely not like bending at the mercy of what the client wants. If we really believe that our data suggests that a particular platform the client wants isn't going to be a good fit, we'll voice that opinion and share why we would maybe start in a different direction. Ultimately, this is where it kind of goes back to the niche and the personas that we're going after. If it's very Gen Z or Gen Alpha, TikTok makes a lot more sense than doing something like Pinterest, Instagram. So we'll think through things that way with the clients, and then also the results they're expecting. If they're like month one, we have to hit a 5x return on ad spend, we'll first say, that's probably not going to happen. And here's a more realistic set of expectations. Once we get them to align with us there, we'll then talk about the platform. So like while TikTok is getting better with time, we generally see stronger return on ad spend still on Meta. So if they're really focused on efficiencies, we would maybe spend a small portion of the budget on TikTok for video view and for kind of building that awareness, and do the rest that are supposed to drive conversions and other placements.
So you mentioned Meta. I have found in my experience with advertising on Facebook, there's a lot of spam going on. Yeah. How do you filter that out with your ad campaigns?
That's a good question. We are relying on the machine learning at this point. So most of the builds we're doing are not saying like target this person over here versus that person. So there's that level of it. We haven't seen it with conversion objectives so heavily on Meta. Where we could maybe say we've seen some of it is our lead gen campaign. So if we're setting up a campaign to say a consumer is going to leave their email or SMS on the Meta ad on Instagram or Facebook, we have had a little bit more issues with just like the cleanliness of the type of consumer will attract that way. Mm-hmm. And then we're just kind of setting more realistic expectations with the client around what percentage of it isn't going to be good. And then like, what is that assumed cost per lead at that point based on knowing that 10% will maybe be junk.
And so, yeah, like you mentioned before, you're focusing mostly on brand awareness, especially in the beginning. So then spam leads are not too much of a concern.
Yeah. Or when we're going to the action of a purchase, the platform's incentivized to get us the purchase.
You kind of already went over this a little bit about the targeting. There are unique advantages and challenges of advertising on each of these platforms. Can you go into some of those unique advantages and challenges with each platform?
Yeah. I'll talk about TikTok first, just because we've been doing a lot of work on TikTok. And I think there's some uncertainty about what the future of TikTok looks like. So some people are a little nervous to go there right now. And we feel like there's two things. Like one, the fear is real. We don't know what's going to happen. I think even with a crystal ball, I still wouldn't know. The level of the efficiencies and costs and the arbitrage of going there right now is still advantageous for most brands to do. So even if it's just for 6 months and then the data goes away, the amount of awareness you can get for the cost of that awareness is pretty beneficial to the business. Within TikTok, once you've kind of made the decision that, yes, it's a place for me to go, when you're setting up your ads to show up in your For You page, you can actually toggle on to show up in search results. And we know at least the younger generations are heavily turning to TikTok for search engines rather than us dinosaurs still going to Google, I guess. And so when someone is keying in these things on TikTok, in search, let's make sure our ads show up. And so now you're not only doing this level of awareness, but however you set up that awareness audience, you can also get this level of high intent, like in-market audience, perhaps, right? So that allows you to get a little bit more efficiency in terms of return ad spend from what you're doing on TikTok. Now, beyond that, TikTok's made it easier for older school advertisers to come over. And by that, I mean, you can do carousel ads that are now mainly image-based. They just launched image ads. So like they're becoming a little bit more mainstream for older school marketers who are struggling with all the creative output that a platform like TikTok needs. So that's going to even the playing field more. And their CPM is much lower. I think their cost per video view too is a little bit lower than Meta. So like relatively speaking, from a awareness perspective, still better than Meta. Now, a little bit of a loss to say what the advantage is there right now. I think it's still heavily used. We've seen a lot more ebbs and flows in terms of like just sustained performance than we used to. So we could have a really good week, log in Monday again, 2 weeks later, and the weekend was just awful, right? So there's a little bit more turbulence there. Is that because it's an election year? Is that because of something else? Like, I think it's still a little unknown, but that's where having a team that can manage full media budgets and kind of move the dollars where we think they're going to be spent the wisest makes more sense than saying like, we were hired specifically for one platform and that's it.
Facebook is still one of the largest social media platforms out there with the largest number of users. Wouldn't that be an advantage also that many businesses most likely will find their audience on that platform?
100%. Yeah. And they're making so many efforts to try to woo the younger folks. So I think another thing we struggle with for our more high-end clients is that look back window. So Meta being locked in at a 7-day maximum look back window can a little bit on that platform, but Advantage Plus Shopping really evens the playing field in terms of just like campaign setup and becoming a little bit more neck and neck with what Google has in Performance Max in terms of expected results. It's pretty rare for us to launch a brand on Meta. We've done it probably like 5 times in my career at Pennock, so it does happen. It's just very few instances of it.
Okay, another interlude here to explain what Nikki is talking about regarding Advantage Plus Shopping on Meta and Performance Max advertising on Google. So Meta, a little bit a while ago, introduced Advantage Plus Shopping campaign, which uses AI to eliminate the manual steps of ad creation and automates up to 150 creative combinations at once. So as an advertiser, all you have to do is input what your goals are. You already have your Facebook page connected to your Meta business account. And basically it'll take existing content that it suggests, or you can upload a video or a image and a caption. And Meta will take that and it will create multiple versions of an ad that are optimized for when viewers are most likely to respond with standard enhancements. So this really scales up the ability for you to create multiple campaigns with very little effort. And Meta uses AI to deliver those campaigns to audiences that are most likely to respond to your ad and who would be in your target audience, but also going beyond your target audience to find new prospects. Regarding Performance Max advertising on Google, Performance Max is a goal-based campaign type that allows performance advertisers to access all of their Google Ads inventory from a single campaign. So it's designed to complement your keyword-based search campaigns to help you find more converting customers across all of Google's channels like YouTube, Display, Search, Discover, Gmail, and Maps. And again, this is AI-powered campaign types that allow you to access all these ad channels. So again, it's helping advertisers navigate the tricky field of setting up campaigns. It makes it easier for advertisers to launch campaigns that are most likely to resonate with their audience and also reach their target audience. All right, let's get back to Nikki.
But Performance Max is really where we spend a lot of our efforts. There are small micro wins from time to time, like standard shopping, which was probably 4 years or something at this point, is coming back into the fold. And we're testing that out a little bit more heavily with brands again, just to see if that can beat Performance Max. So there's always going to be this like of the moment trend to hop on. And if it actually works for them, we'll keep it. But we are not like a one size fits all saying like this worked for the brand over there, so we think it will work for you. So we really have to kind of rebuild and reformat everything we do client by client.
So how do you tailor ad creatives for Amazon ads versus TikTok? I mean, this could be a good question just for organic marketing.
It's really hard and it can become really complicated quickly. So I would say for any brand out there that's just getting started and struggling to figure out how to get assets up for Meta, let alone TikTok and the others, just focus on a couple different hooks that you believe are going to really engage the audience first. As you find wins on whatever platform that is, we can just align and pretend it's Meta for this example. As you find what hooks are working on Meta, then you can augment those hooks for TikTok or the other platforms. But generally speaking, thematically, they can be sort of similar. The execution of it could be different. So we find like in the beauty lane, for example, before and after or outcome hooks still really work. Testimonial, whether that's like a customer quote or in the press, still works really well. Get ready with me is kind of a before and after, but that can work well too. So there's a couple of major hooks that work. And then there's the trending hooks. So I think I would probably recommend doing as little lifting as possible to get it from platform to platform to start with, just so you can get those learnings. Then the different ways you can cut it, whether you're changing the first 3 seconds or some text overlay or something, the better, just because you have more data points to work with. But take big swings when you're doing your creative tests. I think like changing the color from orange to pink, probably not going to really move the needle. I wouldn't really recommend someone test out something that granular.
All right. So for those who don't know what programmatic advertising is, can you explain a little bit about that and how that fits into this mix?
Yeah, absolutely. So programmatic at its simplest level is really developing who your customer is you're going after and following them throughout their digital journey. So this could be a female who is on Goop and then on New York Times, even going to watch like UFC reruns of fights, who knows? But we're latching on to the persona and following that person through their user journey. So that's the most basic level of it. And you can show up as video ads, you can show up as static, catalog ads. So a lot of the same types of mechanisms to serve ads that you would find on Google and on social, you can do on programmatic. Typically, programmatic can include like audio and even connected TV. So there's a lot of possibilities once you find the right ideas to work with to kind of elevate the plan as the months go by. Our brands usually get started with display ads, and they're usually like HTML5 or static. And after we've kind of warmed them and proved that that can work, we'll expand into video or audio, start ingesting their catalog feed, things of that sort. And yes, it's just been a valuable channel, especially as the cookies and cookieless future is approaching. Like, how are we going to really tune into these people? And programmatic's still been a good source of really granular targeting in 2024.
Speaking of cookies, so how is your agency and how are marketers in general, or how should they approach this new world without the cookies?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think it takes us back to some extent. I was talking to another marketer just recently, and she was saying sort of like marketing in the late 90s or early 2000s. Like, it's not something we haven't done before. It's just kind of pushing us into a zone we either haven't been in for a while or newer marketers never had to experience before. I think this is where like the persona building and knowing the type of customer you're going after and how to message to that person is so important. I think looking at a graph of like what matters in a good ad strategy these days, 47% is the ad unit, like the creative itself. It's never been that high. So I think it's really forcing us to find a way to engage, like stop people in their tracks and then get them to convert. I think if brands are doing that well in a world where there are third-party cookies, we're going to continue to succeed. And the machine learning that we're kind of forced to do through Google and Meta is just kind of making us more warm to the idea. Then finally, we started to track for all of our clients marketing efficiency ratio, which is total e-commerce revenue divided by spend in ads. So it's like a ROAS, but off the whole business instead of off of ad return on ad spend, I believe. And I think that this is a good directional to be going in. And if anyone's not tracking that yet, they should, because it's going to allow you to have like a little bit more wiggle room in your ad strategy. Like if the higher the MER, the better. So if I can get a brand to like a 14x return on, or MER, and I can augment how much I spend on awareness to be like a 50% lift compared to last month and like a 50% reduction on remarketing compared to last month, that's a huge win for the brand. Like that's showing them that they're set up for more scale than they when we were not looking at their MER. So for us, that's a really favorable metric to look at. For some business owners and people at brands, like it's too generic, it's vanilla for them to really wrap their heads around. And that's where attribution tools, Northbeam, Triple Whale, things like that could be of good service for brands who really want to get that full attribution tracked over time. And so our brands that are in a little bit more of a growth phase will typically sign on with a Triple Whale or Northbeam, so we can start tracking things that way.
Perhaps I should have asked this earlier, but the 360 effect. So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. It's interesting because I've thought through this in a couple different scenarios. And my usual scenario is like when a brand is just launching, going to market, we usually talk to them about what they're doing for earned media, so their PR, their creators, etc., and what they're doing for organic. And it's usually organic social before even SEO, just because they both take forever to build these days. But it seems like organic social can kind of catch flywheel a little bit faster than SEO can. So it's important for us to talk to brands about how they're doing that, because we want to make sure that when they're thinking about layering on paid or even SEO, they're not latching onto it as like the whole business must exist because of paid. And if paid doesn't work, my business comes tumbling down. I can't tell you how many early stage founders we've worked with, our paid results have attributed to like 90% of their sales. And like, without us, your business doesn't really exist. And these are usually the bootstrap companies that are self-funded. So every moment of spend is like, really high stress for them. So we usually want to understand what brands are doing for earned and owned first for that reason, and say like, work with those creators at this moment in time. Creator UGC is still so big. So get a couple of those under your belt so that when you want to elevate ads, and maybe that's Q2 after launch, then we've got some assets that are not just branded to off of. So that's normally like the path for like the more bootstrapped, like I'm just getting this going with my money situation. I think people do flip it over when they have funding and do owned and paid first, and then follow up with earned and the PR and the influencer, because they know they have a set amount of budget to grow that. I don't know if I fully answered your question, but like you need all parts going. You need all parts firing for marketing to exist. And I think the phased approach makes sense, and the phases change based on how your business is started.
Yeah, and that's how I start my clients out. It's like you can start off with the basic, because if you don't have a website, a blog, social media accounts at the very minimal, and then it's difficult to bootstrap. If you own a business, you want to focus your energies on running your business, developing your product. How can a smaller or newer brand, a new company, compete effectively against larger companies? Because home goods and lifestyle and beauty, there's huge companies out there. And so if you've got a new beauty product, you've got a new company or a new home goods stores, even a mom and pop, how can they compete against larger companies with huge budgets?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing I would recommend, and it's so hard, even like running an agency, I have a hard time with this, is like, don't try to rip off your favorite competitor, right? Like if you're just going to try to like be where they are, whether your ad play or your SEO content is going to kind of mimic their content, it's not going to work. So I think you really have to figure out what stands you apart from everybody else. Is it something about the product? Is it something about your audience? And figure out the ins and outs there. I talked to a startup who was making furniture with locks in it for things like cannabis and, potentially firearms, just like stuff you don't want your kids to find, right? And one of the first things she did was she got in with the local cannabis shops. And so they had like lounges, and her furniture is now focused in, a center in their many location lounge area. And I think those corner cases of like, where do these people hang out and how can I be front and center there, is much more important than batching and blasting. And for those reasons, sometimes business owners come to us and they're like, well, should we just target like Southern California? And I'm like, well, Technically, yeah, that sounds super sound. But when we're going after ad strategies that are optimized for your purchase, like I can't tell you with confidence that I believe targeting Southern California is going to be smarter than targeting the US. So that's where like you have to look at the map of how you're going to market, who those unique people are, and where you can really infiltrate them. So I think like for us, the surround sound effect of like get them as many impressions as possible is really important. But if your budget is $2,000 and you want to target San Diego to like Santa Barbara, you're not going to infiltrate them, like show them 10 impressions of your ad. If you're lucky, you'll maybe get 3, right? So like the potential customer client has still no idea who you are with all the noise of ads on digital.
And when you were talking about the example with the cannabis and creating this unique furniture with the locks, that's kind of like going back to the idea of niching your product and your audience.
Yeah. And I think one could come up with probably 100 different reasons why you would want a lock on your furniture, right? But like for the founder to go out and try to like explain away why all 100 of those cases are right would be a waste of her time if she knows that she over-indexes for cannabis consumption. Go there and try to make inroads there.
Do you have any success stories you can share from smaller brands you've worked with or even larger brands?
Yeah, let me think through some of them because off the top of my head, I mean, I'll give you a good TikTok example because this kind of goes back to just, targeting and personas, et cetera. So we started working with a fragrance brand last year and they had done TikTok advertising with another agency and demo was perfect for TikTok. So they're like, we need this to work, but we're so nervous because our last agency didn't do a good job. So we kind of looked back at what the last agency did, which wasn't wrong. They went after people who liked scents and fragrance as one would in the fragrance space. But having just onboarded with this client, we had such rich and real-time data around their personas that we were learning that they were like Coachella, maybe Burning Man type attendees. And so like we were learning these things that were not about fragrance, about their core customer. And so we went in and just augmented a build and just said, let's go after people who like this type of music, this type of event, like these other characteristics that have nothing to do with fragrance. And that was a quick win. I don't think we've turned TikTok off since we've done this, to win them over. So I think those are corner cases again of like, the obvious route of going after a fragrance, not a bad idea, but if you are not going to pivot when the results aren't good fast enough, you will lose interest, your client will lose interest, whatever, and just say simply TikTok isn't right. We just augmented ever so slightly and found a win there. So that's one example. I think another one, just going into geo-targeting, is we were working with a brand that was growing quite quickly compared to the national average in certain demographics. And their budgets were also increasing. So we said, let's use this as an opportunity to try a new channel, that channel being programmatic. And we said, let's intentionally geo-saturate these top regions. They're going to get their TikTok ads, their Meta ads, their Google ads. But in addition to those, they're going to get programmatic ads. And that allowed us to really, truly geo-saturate. So everyone in the demo was getting a lot more impressions than elsewhere in the country. And it continued to elevate the growth of those parts of the country. It wasn't something we left on always, but it's something we would continue to test, like quarterly pulses of new regions that weren't part of the mix earlier. So those are just smart ways to slice and dice first the customer's data and then approaches to the channels.
All right. You mentioned earlier, we were talking about machine learning and that kind of comes into play with artificial intelligence and the programmatic advertising. So how do you see the role of artificial intelligence and machine learning with all these marketing strategies that you employ with paid advertising, even SEO and everything?
First of all, from a paid side, some of our smaller clients we've pitched to have found like a Perflect or an Otis or another AI generated ad buying solution. And they're like, we're going in that direction. They're, half of your cost or lower. We're like, okay, I don't know how to compete there. So yes, go do your thing. And then usually a few months later, they come back and they're like, that wasn't at all what we expected. So now we're ready to work together. And we in-house, even though we're a small team, like we take time to test out the competitors by way of like these AI plays. One, to see if they can really augment what we can do so we can do it faster and smarter. And two, really understand what that competition looks like. And we haven't found anything that beat our human capabilities. So we do believe, like, we expect it to change with time. It hasn't happened yet. So I think ad buying and just day-to-day manipulation of what's still something that does require a human touch. We saw tools are really good at pushing over Google recommendations and some of the basics that you wouldn't find in platform and recommending, or auto implementing those, which is usually a no-no for anyone who is actually a media buyer. So for now, what we've been doing with AI is kind of using it more towards a lane of, let's get a first pass of a creative brief over a creative example. Let's get a first pass of ad copy together, maybe some idea about personas and targeting, but we're not like, a human is still looking at everything before it's in a state that makes sense for the client. In the SEO lane, I think it's way more complicated because everyone's writing stuff with Chat GPT now, and I don't know when that will change. And I don't know with 100% confidence how it's impacting how one ranks, but I am curious to see how it comes together because I can't imagine getting ideas and then writing content from scratch. Like, grammatically, I have tons of errors in my writing. So
there's so many errors.
I always push my content through there to just grammar correct, but I feel comfortable. I don't think there's a reason not to do things that way, but I wouldn't build your whole SEO content marketing strategy on AI at this point. There have been more rumors in summer of 24 about shadow bans on social media for people overusing AI. I don't have 100% proof that's happening yet either, but I think those are things that we'll continue to see potentially down the road.
We're going to have to embrace it in some way fully, but not yet.
Yeah.
There's ways it can help you speed up your work, outlining and so on, but not for final.
Yeah, agree.
Can you leave our listeners with one final piece of advice or words of wisdom when launching an ad campaign?
Would be, let's make sure that your pixel is firing on the website. It's QA'd against all of the events. For e-commerce, this is usually view content, maybe email sign up, add to cart, initiate checkout, things like this, along with e-commerce conversions. This will allow you to remarket and take advantage of people who have fired events other than just conversion in your full marketing mix. Beyond that, I would say success for launching a new campaign right now in 2024 is really about making sure you're open to broad audiences and machine learning audiences, just because that's where we're seeing the best success nowadays. So I would say reduce the need to have a clean full funnel strategy and just lean into the trends and what's working in real time.
That's great. And where can we find you online in your agency?
Me on LinkedIn. I'm Nikki Lindgren, so you can check me out there. For our business overall, we do tend to be the most active on TikTok and on YouTube. You can look for Pennock or pennock.co anywhere on social and find us. And then our website domain is Pennock, pennock.co.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. And listeners, stay tuned for more actionable tips in our next episode. Have a great week.
Thank you so much, Laura.
All right. Thank you for listening to the Bootstrap Digital Marketing Podcast, where you can get practical tips and advice on marketing your business. Subscribe to get alerts about new episodes. And if you enjoyed this episode, please click like and share with your friends and colleagues. The Bootstrap Digital Marketing Podcast is produced by myself, Laura Tate, and Crackerjack Scribe.